That's essentially what it was about. Her words were very, very moving, I thought. And I agree. One can find fault with the Republicans as to why they're, and one can find fault with the Democrats who also are projecting policies that are, opposite or opposed to what the Republicans consider. I don't think that we can get into the individual policies, but it's pretty much a childish standoff, one from the other. You can blame the Republicans, and I think that if you dig deep enough, you can blame the Democrats too. They have their own who are refusing to vote, and she is an example of it, and she's not the only one, who are refusing to vote with Democratic policy. So the question becomes, what should our representatives, all of them, what should they be doing? At what point should they look across the aisle and say, well, I don't totally agree with your policy, only in part, but I will vote for it because I think that it could be the best for America. I don't know exactly. I think it comes down to the individual policies, and it's at that very moment that one party or the other, one representative or the other, senator or the other, must concede or must be willing to give in a little bit. How do we do that? Our history of Democrats and Republicans has been, as of late, we stick together and we don't accommodate the other party in any way whatsoever. I think Mitch McConnell, I want to blame him, and then there are times when I think what he is doing is appropriate. And by the same token, what's his name?
Schumer.
The Democratic leader from New York escapes me. His name is Schumer. Yeah, I think he is the same way. He wants his way. From what I've seen, practically all of the time, seems unwilling to give in, and always seems to be enmeshed in how to get a group together who will support his policy, the Democratic policies. So there's a little bit of that on both sides. I don't know. What do you do? What do they do? This is our life. This is our country. This is our way of living. They are supposed to be representing us. They're not. How do we get them to come back together? What kind of compromises or thoughts? What kinds of things can we remind them of? And does this affect the nature of the people that we vote for? I guess it does in some instance. At any rate, that's what I see going on, and I don't think it's good.
Well, there's a two-edged sword here, and I agree with Sinema to the extent that we're talking about legislation. And there may be ways, although offhand I think it'd be very difficult. But as far as environmental things, as far as taxation is concerned, as far as infrastructure, yes, there may be compromises, but there is the cultural aspects of all this, the life stories, such as was the 2020 election an honest election? Was the January 21 insurrection really an insurrection, or was it just a collection of tourists having a good time? These fundamental differences are much less apt to be compromised between the two parties, because they really do involve completely different worldviews. So just to summarize, I agree with Cinema on legislation, on policy, but for the life of me, I cannot see the answer when it comes to basic cultural a question such as, was Trump anti-constitution and anti-democratic? How do you compromise on that?
Well, may I make a point? I think what Steve is saying is correct, and to summarize it, we do not agree with what is true, but more importantly, we don't agree with what is fact. And if you can't agree on that, then how do you compromise? And when you were saying the people who voted for that, they're not representing, the senators are not representing the people who voted for them. In fact, I think it's just the opposite. If you look at the polls say that the Republican Party believes 80 some odd percent, maybe more, that Trump did not lose the election. If he didn't lose the election, then in fact the election was stolen, and then in fact the people who attacked the Congress were heroes. And I think they thought of themselves as heroes in many cases, most cases. If Trump lost the election, then the people who attacked the Congress were insurrectionists, were in open rebellion. How do you bring those two things together? We try. I'm sorry.
The way you bring the two things together is you look at the facts. That's the problem. People, both sides don't want to agree on the facts. And that's exactly what you were saying. The facts are there was no wide voter fraud. The voter fraud was minuscule, and most of it was done on the Republican side. There was no massive Democratic voter fraud. You know, the same people that voted Trump in also voted in the a lot of the representatives and senators on the Republican side. So they, you know, it's just preposterous. The insurrection was being planned in late October, before the election. That they were preparing for this in several different groups were preparing for this in late October, and then throughout November, throughout December, and finally in January. They came prepared. They came prepared with guns, with ammunition, with bombs, you know, with other types of things to assault the Capitol. It was being planned. It was being planned by the White House, by Trump's friends, and all the way down. Trump tried to overthrow the government because he knew he was going to lose the election.
Paul, I have to interrupt you. I think you're being outrageous.
No, I'm not being outrageous. You are being outrageous by believing Trump.
Guys, calm down. Calm down.
When you're talking about facts, I think you're making up your own facts. I don't know where you have this information going back.
I agree with you.
And there was really no evidence during, and you keep calling this an insurrection. Nobody, and Bob said that earlier, nobody's been charged with insurrection.
Yes, there are.
That's not true. The indictments came down today.
If that's the case, and that's brand new, because that prior to today, there was nobody charged with insurrection.
That's correct.
But I believe
it's not insurrection.
No evidence.
Can
I finish speaking?
Yes, go ahead.
I don't believe
Yeah,
there was
go
any
ahead.
evidence of guns being brought there. There may have been other types of objects. What are you holding your head for?
Because
Chuck.
they're visible at the scene.
There's
I don't know that there were guns at the scene, but there were guns
Yes, there were.
stockpiled in
I can see
Maryland.
them on TV.
In Virginia, in Maryland, in motel rooms, there were guns stockpiled.
No, there.
Okay, that
At the Capitol, they're visible.
Can you please, Paul, at some point, get me an article that says that for a fact, or tell me where I can see that on a video or something to that effect, because I don't believe that's true.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Did you watch
Can I
TV?
interject a little bit here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes,
What
yes,
I
please,
was going
Romano.
to say is that what Pat was saying is, is it possible, without going into the Trump issues and the insurrection issues, can the Congress the representatives come together and do something good for the country? Is that possible, given that for lack of any term, given that insurrection or whatever you call it, all of those are sub judice. So without looking at that, can we then look at other policy matters? Can the representatives look at other policy matters and get us something for the country that will make the country better? Then they can go into the streets of Washington and kill each other. That's two different issues. So that's what I think I got from Pat's introduction to cinema. I have not read it myself, but that's what I thought. So I agree with Pat in that is it possible that they can agree on something so that we can get something good done? But I don't know what that is.
You read me right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what that's what I got from what you just said. So, but I don't have a solution. Only thing I know, the second point I was going to make is that it would be wrong for us to assume that we did not elect them. We did elect them. We elected our representatives. Other people elected their representatives. Obviously, they represent them. Somebody represents me. So whatever my representative is saying, hopefully those are the things which I want. And so that way, you do have people in Congress or in the Senate who are doing their things based on individual political outlooks. But at the same time, we expect them to come together. Hopefully they will do that.
You've read me very, very well. I agree. I think that's what should be our concern. What can we possibly suggest, think, hope for, and possibly realize that can move both parties to put forward legislation that is meaningful for the country, for all of us. I agree that this whole situation with what happened has, I think, moved us to a point where our democracy was in danger. Whether the Republicans were right in searching for, and what I'm talking about obviously is the insurrectionists, whether they had some justification or not, will remain to be seen if things unfold. I'm not sure of exactly what, but above and beyond all that, I think the point of the program, the point of what we should be doing, is not rehashing that, or whether they are guilty of whatever, of trying to overthrow the government. I think what we should be talking about at this point is, how do we come together What can we do for the country? What kinds of things can possibly take place that will make both sides? There is great division. I think we all recognize that between what both parties want. Lately, news that I have seen indicates that this division will probably continue. The Republicans may pick up a little bit, and they may be in the majority in the next session. But does that mean, and it probably does, that there still will be that division? The country is literally, I think, in some danger. I don't know to what extent, but there has to be a way out. There has to be policy or ideas that can bring us back together the way we are supposed to be, the way the people who formed our government intended. That's what I'm looking for. If you want to rehash what happened and talk about weapons and your side and my side, I think we're just persevering with the same nonsense, not nonsense, seriousness, but there's no sense, there's no way out. There's nothing to be had by going back and forth with blame. What ideas can we come up with for the future to bring them together? That's the key, I think.
Just from my point of view, what I would do is I would think about how the United States needs infrastructure being redone. You need to do some things at the domestic level so that the inflation comes down, so that the common man can earn a wage that is livable. And at the same time, look for the foreign policy problems that are really essentially eating our lunch. You have China encroaching, you have Russia encroaching, you have Middle East problems. So unless the United States, these bunch of senators and congressmen get together, what is going to happen is we will lose the superiority, or whatever you can call it, of the United States in pretty few years. That's what I see going to be the saddest part of the twist of the fate.
Let me make a comment. Going back to what Paul, was it Pat that said, as far as bringing people together. When President Biden's made his inaugural address, he spoke very much about working together, and I forgot all the fancy words and things, and trying to unite the country and so forth. At the same time, since that time, there's been so many things that have been said by him or people in his administration calling Republicans or conservatives domestic terrorists and accusing people that that's never going to bring this country together as long as that side of the Democratic Party wants to keep popping and pointing fingers.
Oh, Chuck, I'd like to address that later, but let me go back to Pat for a moment. Pick a important topic, or not topic, important goal that you think that the Republicans and Democrats can work on together and come up with a reasonable plan and pass it. For example, they did do that with infrastructure, but they did that only because of a Senate rule that said that if it had to do with a budget reconciliation, you could do it without 60 votes.
Majority, yeah.
So even there, and I think Paul said infrastructure, I think Obanon said infrastructure. I'm assuming Chuck and Pat agree on that. Even there, we could not get enough people together to, by following the rules, make it happen.
But it has happened in the past.
There were a lot of things that happened in the past.
Right.
Including a civil war.
Happen now?
Because I think the attitude has changed, and it's not just the Republicans. I think of myself as a moderate, and I think that the Democrats in some cases have gone overboard trying to take advantage of their, quote, one opportunity to transform society. And I think the Republicans tried to do exactly the same thing 4 years ago. And because of the filibuster, they failed. So I think the filibuster has great usage if it's used properly. But as I was saying earlier, when we first started to talk about this, when there is a game with a set of rules, both sides have to agree to play by those rules, or one side is at a terrific disadvantage, because the side that plays by the rules when they feel like it is constantly in control. And it forces the side that's trying to play by the rules to rethink their whole attitude, because they can't get anything done and they keep getting beat because the rules say I have to do X, but the other side doesn't do that when it works in their favor. So, and I think and I haven't listened to Kirsten's speech, but based on the reporting I heard earlier, she was trying to talk to both sides.
She was.
Okay, well then let's pick something. I'm sorry, Paul.
She was trying to talk to both sides to say, let's do what's good for the country, and we should be able to get 60 votes to do what's good for the country. The problem is they can't get 60 votes. They can't even get 50 votes to do what's good for the country. That right now, with all of these laws to suppress voting, the Republicans are trying to change the who can vote and who can't vote. They're talking about citizens who should not be able to vote. Now, that's the fundamental truth of any democracy. Everyone has a right to vote.
Well, that's
you
another
can't take
fact.
their rights to vote away. I know what you're going to say.
At all.
That is exactly what they're doing.
Everyone who comes into the country has the right to vote. No. Citizens, and that's exactly what they are trying to do, is to contain it so that citizens vote, not everyone. It has been proven already.
Pat, you're wrong.
Last election,
you're wrong.
There were
they are
people
trying
who
to
voted
limit
who
the
should
number
not.
of citizens who can vote, and then
Wrong,
they want
Paul.
to have. Then they want to be able to have the legislature in Republican-controlled states overrule the vote of the citizens. That's what they're doing.
Paul,
Pay attention. Pay
not
attention.
true.
But
Not
by the
true.
way,
It is exactly true.
Where's
It
your
is
facts,
not.
Paul?
Exactly
Talk
true.
about facts.
facts, if you want to look at the Georgia rules are the ones that everybody talks about, and talk about overreaching. When Georgia passed their rules saying you can only vote at certain times, and oh, by the way, those times limit the voting of minorities who often vote at other times. You can only vote in certain ways at certain locations because the people who vote against you tend to be minorities, vote at these other times. That's an attempt to try to limit the who gets the vote. When they said, and here's where they overreached and made everything else ridiculous, when they said that if you're standing in a line for an extended period of time, which by the way happened in the last couple of years multiple times, someone was not allowed to give you a bottle of water. That number one,
Yeah, right.
Well, that's taken out of context.
It is.
No, it isn't.
I agree.
Okay, what's the context? Please give me a better context.
You can point to so many different contexts that are, and that one, the context is fine, but that particular situation, I can't quite imagine.
But
It's
it
part of
happened.
the law.
They gave this person water. In other words, the intent was to buy their vote with the water.
I think that's what the legislature claims. It hasn't happened yet. Nobody's been prosecuted.
Wait a minute,
because
I'm
the
not
law was
following
just
you.
passed. But in 2022, if there's a long line in a voting area in a minority district of Atlanta, and people are standing in line for hours at a time, and somebody offers them water, that becomes a crime.
I'm not sure
Punishable-
that's true, Paul. I mean, Bob.
Yeah, so
No, I think you're taking it.
In other words, the intent is to buy their vote with the water.
they're claiming that, but I doubt very much that that's how.
The Democrats are claiming.
The Democrats are claiming.
Do you think that's a reasonable situation? I mean, would you, if you saw someone giving water to someone in line, would you be concerned that their vote was being purchased?
No.
No, me neither. I would think that it would have to be a hell of a lot more. I mean, the individual is still an individual, and he can. I mean, it's possible that he changes his vote, but he does it as an individual. If the individual is not, how can I say this? If they are so weak as to sell their vote for a cup of water or a bottle of water, I don't think there's much you can do about it, regardless of which party it helps.
Okay,
Bob,
let me put it another way. Let's pretend in Massachusetts we pass a law similar to that in Georgia, and then somewhere along the line, the Democratic Party or the mayor of Boston decides that we're going to close all of the precincts for Beacon Hill and Brookline and Randolph, etc., and we're going to put them all down in Roxbury, one location, and we're not going to provide any parking on the street. It's going to mean that the voters from those areas, number one, may be a little bit nervous about going down to Roxbury, and number two, are going to be spending many, many hours in line where their car may be 5 miles away. And you're not allowed, when somebody's putting in 5 hours of their time, to give somebody a bottle of water.
Bob, you're trying to fabricate stories now.
But that's what's happening in Atlanta.
That's the law they passed. That is the law they passed.
You guys are listening to too much on talking points on CNN or something.
What do you think the law was? Seriously, if I'm wrong, please educate me.
Yeah.
What is the law about? What is the law supposed to address?
It's
voting.
Where they can vote?
Well, no, where they can vote is local. And in fact, in Atlanta, they have had occasions where they've closed for a variety of reasons, some of which are legitimate. They don't have enough poll workers. They don't have enough working machines. So they close some precincts. And they end up with one precinct that handles what ordinarily would be 5 or 6 precincts. And so you have long lines.
What would you do?
If
you were in charge of that, what would you do?
I think the one he's talking about is on the day before the election, the lease was terminated and that voting place was closed.
Okay.
What would I do? I would have not allowed the lease to terminate. Let's start with that. I'll give you another one. Here's one from about 4 years ago. there was a election for governor of Kansas, I think it was. And about a week before the election, they closed the precinct in a minority area in Kansas and moved it 10 miles away with no public transportation to get to.
No reason for it?
I'm sure if I go back, I'm sure that we'll come up with a reason, but I guarantee you that the reason doesn't hold water, because there could have been another precinct place opened up within a few blocks, if not a quarter mile from the original place. But to move it to a place where the minority population can't get to it, you know.
That's wrong.
Thank you. But that
Yeah.
happened. What
didn't
happened in
Texas-
Atlanta was not nearly as blatant, but similar approach.
I can't understand why there were not people who spoke up and contested it. Even within, where was this, Kansas, you
I
said?
think it was Kansas.
Yeah.
I believe it was
Yeah.
Kansas.
I can't imagine that there would not be opposition to that move.
Yeah, there was.
It is-
Of course, there was
It-
opposition to the
the
move, but
American
it was too
vein.
late.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Once the election is over, it's over. Now you have to deal with it. Unless, of course, you say the whole thing was stolen and you try to take it to court. The court keeps throwing it out, but you keep claiming it's true. After a while, you just have to deal with what is. Now, as it turned out, if I remember correctly, the Republican who was running for governor, lost that election.
I'd like to
Which,
hear some comments from Steve, what Steve might want to add in any particular part at all, Steve, regardless
Yeah,
of
well,
anything.
I was trying to resurrect in my own mind. I think there was an example in Texas where all the drop boxes were taken up, and there was one drop box in like a couple of 100 square mile area, just simply to reduce the number of people who voted using drop boxes. I believe it was Texas, and people had to drive like 100 miles to find a drop box.
From my perspective, it's easy for all of us have certain memories of certain things that are hard to remember all the right facts and the details. It's easy for us to try to reminisce about certain things and not necessarily remember the whole story factually. So I think going back 3, 4, 5 years, unless you want to bring some documentation that we can actually work off of, I think is waste of time, personally.
Let me bring up another topic completely. What do you think of providing a federally documented card for each citizen that allows the person to vote? That means there is a federal agency that goes to your home and gives it to you right there, rather than ask you to come to whatever place and then produce a card. Is that possible? That would satisfy another side that they ask for a voter registration card.
There's a problem with that. I understand what you're saying, but the problem is, given a secret ballot, which is important because if you don't have it, then somebody can be intimidated or paid, as the case may be. What you're suggesting would make it almost impossible to avoid somebody knowing who you voted for.
Well, no, I'm not saying that you divulge who you voted for. What I'm saying is we have objections that voter registration cards are impossible because we have people who cannot get their card made, cannot get their ID straightened out, don't have transportation to get there, are old, or all those things. But what I'm saying is it possible for the federal government to go to each voter who is registered as a citizen voter and go to their home and give them the cards made right in their house. And then you don't have to ask them who they vote for. Now they have an ID, federally issued ID forever.
Are you saying, let me get straight on my, you're just saying you're talking about an ID for a person? Is that what you're talking about right
Yes,
now?
yes.
That's all you're talking about?
That's all I'm talking about.
That is my understanding of that is available for anybody within this country. And if you can't afford it, I believe most states, if not all states, will provide it to you at no charge.
Actually, that part isn't true, but I can't tell you the states where it's not
Don't
true.
say something isn't true unless you can tell me where it is.
Well, I'm making a list of things to research, and I'm putting that on the list.
Well, let me give you an example right here. For example, if I don't have a car and I have no way of taking a bus to go to JFK building, I have no ID.
But you're supposing, because you have a car, right? You're not talking about yourself.
No, I'm not. I'm just giving an example, not myself, but there are other individuals who are in that status.
But you as that person, you don't know anybody in town that can get you a ride to the town hall to get a ID card. You can't.
I'm just making a supposition that there are individuals who either are reluctant to ask for help or
that's their fault. And if they're reluctant,
they may be handicapped, Chuck.
They may be handicapped. I mean, there are lots of things.
What do you mean by handicapped?
Handicapped as in unable to get out. Let's say I'm in a nursing home and now I have a new address. I used to live someplace. I'm now in a nursing home. I'm aware I want to vote, but I don't have any way to get to town hall or state house.
I would be embarrassed to think that as a person like that couldn't call their local town hall or city hall and tell them about their dilemma, and something will be done to help them get an ID card.
I'm not sure that it's even legal. It's certainly in some areas, but it's not clear to me that it's legal anywhere for somebody to come in and essentially come to my nursing home, take time out of their workday, go to my nursing home and register me to vote. I don't know.
Would you volunteer to deliver food for people?
Yes.
Would you not be?
I think it has to be a town employee that has to do
get
that.
an ID.
Well, I can tell you that if I would certainly be willing to do it. Let's start from that, but I'm not sure that it's legal. I know in some places it's illegal for me to get somebody's ballot and transport it to a drop box or something.
Why are you taking their ballot there?
Because they don't have any other way to get it there. Or maybe
there's a provision for that as far as mail-in ballots.
Actually,
you apply for
questionable because mail-in ballots are being blamed for Biden winning. So they're doing what they can to eliminate mail-in ballots.
Oh, they're trying to eliminate ballots for people who don't request them and not just flooding everybody. I got my wife and I both got ballots in the mail for the last presidential election. We didn't ask for them. We went to the poll and voted in spite of that and turned those ballots in and told them that we got these. We didn't ask for them.
That is kind of strange that I had to fight
and
fill out the form to get the ballot.
Today, there are 8 people in.
Form. Huh?
Today, there are 8 people. 10 people in Georgia that have been that are under indictment for voter fraud. They requested a mail-in ballot. It never came, so they went to the voting place and voted. They they are facing 10 years in prison and $100,000 fine for that. The ballot that they requested never arrived at their house. And
Well,
yet here they
and
are.
that's something that the court's going to have to decide whether that what they're saying.
Right, they're under indictment.
Yeah, they're going to go through it. They're not being said they're guilty. They're having an opportunity to be able to say their case and try to prove what they did or what they didn't do.
Yeah. So it's a difficult situation, but that's 10 votes as opposed to 2 million, 5 million, 7 million.
They want to stop. The big thing is about stopping people from harvesting, sending out all these ballots, including the nursing homes, and then have some individuals go to these nursing homes where there's 400 or 500 people and just going over and gathering all these ballots up and possibly helping some of these patients fill out their ballots and then bring these ballots, these 300 to 500 ballots back and turning them all at one time. That's part of a major problem.
By the way, Chuck, I have to say what you're describing did happen in North Carolina. There was a guy who was running for Congress, and either he himself or somebody in his employ did exactly that.
Too.
Yes, he was a Republican.
I know that. I know the story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yes, it can happen. But
I don't. It's right, but it happens on both sides. That doesn't mean it's okay for one side to do it or not.
The thing that I'm frustrated with is in 3 states, they passed a law, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, that the legislature can overrule the election, and they can send their own delegates to Washington to vote for president. They don't have to accept the numbers that the registry of voters produce as the election results.
Well, we have a federal system, so the states have an ability to an extent to control their own elections. So whether you like it, I like it or not, they can make their own rules and regulations. And I don't fully understand exactly what you're saying these people that state's doing, but
I didn't say that they've done it yet, but that's the law they passed. They don't have to agree with the registrar when they publish the voting tally.
by the way, something that is coming out now, we've been aware of it for a few weeks, few months. In at least 3 states, there were Republicans who, states that Biden won, there were Republicans who filled out a document saying that they, invalidly, were saying that they were the electors and they voted for Trump, and they sent it in to Congress and to the National Archives, which is what you're supposed to do with these votes. So what you're describing is something that has already been tried. That was part of the conspiracy, which, by the way, we'll be hearing more about. Part of the conspiracy to, in fact, steal the election. Getting back to all of these things that we're talking about, it turns out was a very, very well thought out, very well done plan to have Trump declared the winner. Let's go back to something I tried to talk about a little bit earlier. We got about 15 minutes. What can we, as a group, with obviously a whole bunch of different perspectives, agree is something that needs to be done and come up with something that we agree as an approach to make it happen?
What about the filibuster? We haven't talked about that.
Okay.
That could conceivably be a route to prevent the legislation from being stifled.
It could be, but at the same time, let's look at it from the other point of view. One of the reasons why the filibuster is important, I don't know if that's why it was originally done, but why it's important is you don't want a group to come into power and immediately pass a whole bunch of things to change society. About, what was it, 4 years ago, there was a get rid of the Obamacare. Just get rid of it and we'll figure out what to do for medical care for all these poor people some point later. And it was the filibuster that basically prevented that from happening. So, the left used the filibuster. I don't think they use it in the same way as the right did today, but they used the filibuster for something they thought was really, really important.
Was it the same form of
The right
filibuster
did.
we have now?
Yeah.
The right did it also for the election of Supreme Court justices.
Yes.
They,
Well, let's be honest. The original thing having to do with justices was that the left was filibustering a whole bunch of nominees and judges that were being made by Bush. I think it was Bush.
Wasn't that for Bork also? Was it used for Bork?
Well, Bork, yeah, it was used for Bork. You're right. And then later, the right said, "Well, we're gonna get rid of the filibuster for Supreme Court judges because they had gotten rid of it for regular justices." I think a misuse. I think the real issue is a misuse of this power. Instead of saying the majority rules, but the minority must be protected, the rule is either the minority prevents anything from happening, or the majority rules. There's no mixing. But I don't know how to enforce the fact that the filibuster can only be used for legitimate reasons. Because remember, in the 30s, the filibuster was used to maintain Jim Crow laws, among other things.
Yes, yes.
So I don't know how you enforce a rule. You have to either have people actually agree and be willing to stand up and say, this is what's right, whether it helps me or hurts me, it's what's right, or you have to get rid of it. I would much prefer the former.
I think that there is a difference between the filibuster as it's currently in practice and the traditional filibuster, which goes back, God knows how long, 100 years or so. Previously, a speaker had to hold the floor for long periods of time. And as far as I can remember, one of the points was to stimulate debate. The way that filibuster is constructed today, it's being interpreted as it takes 60 senators to pass anything, which is a much more frequent and lenient use of the filibuster. And people don't have to hold the platforms for continuously. It's just the threat of doing it is enough. So it's much too easy now.
You can't get anything done.
But you can't get anything done.
If I decide to filibuster and I can get a few other people to go along with me, I can yield to them for some period of time while I go to the bathroom, among other things, and then come back and pick up because they'll return. I still have the floor. So filibuster could literally go on for months.
But it really didn't in practice.
It didn't, but
it really did not.
Of some of the civil rights legislation, it did. And what McConnell has said was, if you get rid of the filibuster, then he will just throw in 1,000 amendments to whatever bill you want to bring up and talk them as long as they can. So it's the threat of locking the Senate up so nothing gets done, literally nothing, that it causes this 60 vote thing.
Well, yeah. So if we can just return to a more difficult filibuster to implement, that might be a step in the right direction. Make it so it's not automatic with every single vote.
I tend to agree with you, but I don't know how you enforce it. I don't know how you set up these rules. And
Well, they're Byzantine.
Huh? I'm sorry.
They're Byzantine.
Okay, but it's factual that I could set up whatever rule I want as long as I have 51 votes. And tomorrow, when the other side gets their 51 votes, they set up whatever rules they want.
Yeah. This is what Kristen Sinema was saying, that the rights of the minority should be protected, and what you really need is senators who are willing to work with each other, and right now we don't have that. No senators are willing to work with the other side, no matter which side they're on.
Is Pat still with us?
Pat? Yeah, he's here.
I don't know. I haven't heard him recently, so.
Well, he's here, but I don't hear him either.
For me, I'm here.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I'm here. I'm here, and I understand. I'm trying to follow your argument, Bob.
Yeah.
With regard to, I'm just thinking on a higher plane, not a higher plane, but another. As I tried to input a little earlier, what kinds of things should we be paying attention to? What would be needed to get the two parties, essentially Kristen Sinema's plea, to get the two parties to work together? And the more I think about it, I think it may be something from outside the country that will finally bring the parties out of necessity to work together. It has happened in the past during the world wars. China is a conspicuous threat and may well be the reason why ultimately the two parties come to work together. I don't know if we're going to find grounds. What you're discussing is a possibility, but remote. I can't imagine what we could ask the two parties or present to them that would bring the two of them together at this point. I mean, they are conspicuously separated. It seems to me that it has to be something outside the country, possibly within, but it has to be very big. Otherwise, what we're doing is arguing the way things are, but not finding a way to change them. You know, we haven't talked about anything that is a possible change that would cause them. I think Omanon was trying to reach in that direction, but I don't think that we've come up with anything specific that would cause. The only thing I can think of, there are other things, I'm sure. China is definitely a threat. The infiltration alone, and if it comes to a conflict between them, then obviously the parties will come together. And
I would hope, but I don't have confidence, but I would hope.
Oh, I do. They always have in the past. The country has always come together. And I think maybe I'm not suggesting going out and looking for conflict, but I think we're close to some kind of confrontation. Stories about what's happening with Chinese shipping, so much infiltration that I hear about here in America. The number of people, the number of individuals, the number of companies that are being bought, have been purchased. There's a great deal of Chinese influence here in America. Some of it is very, very conspicuous, and some of it, a lot of it, I'm sure, is hidden. I don't know. There's constant talk about America's Navy challenging the Chinese Navy and a lot of other points. But I just wonder whether it's going to take that to bring America back.
So that's the common enemy theory.
Pardon me?
That's the common enemy theory.
Common enemy, yes. And at this time, it seems like, because everything that we talk about inside that has happened and is happening between the parties. And I think that's what Kristen Sinema's plea was about. It's a plea. She hasn't solved anything. She has only presented hope. I think something like an international problem, whether it's the Chinese or not, could possibly bring the two parties together. America first.
Just like Vietnam or Afghanistan or Iraq.
Or the Cold War.
The Cold War.
If you're talking about confrontation with China, you're talking about Armageddon.
I think so
just
too.
like having a war with Russia. That's inconceivable.
How about
because
North Korea?
Russia.
The loser is going to start using nuclear bombs.
Yeah, you don't have to go out and wage a war. You have to be united in having a policy towards this kind of slow aggression, which is without any nuclear bombs, so that you create a specific structure to fight against this, what is constantly happening. Though that's why both the parties need to get together. That's why I thank you, Pat, for bringing it up again. Because if we get together against, as Steve pointed out, against the common enemy and create policies to confront that. We don't have to go out for war and fight and war, but economic war is enough.
Yeah. Anything short of an actual confrontation, because right now we've the way our CEOs are going, they're selling off for the money. It's all about money. It's.
Don't blame the multinational corporations for doing their responsible thing, which is protecting their shareholders. That's their job. They're not General Motors, which used to be the prototypical American company. It's not an American company. It's a multinational. They don't have any requirement that they do what some segment of the American population says is good for that segment.
In spite of being destructive to the United States, that's not a common cause.
It's not, because they're not an American company. Is Royal Dutch Shell?
Doesn't matter, Bob. I reject your premise.
Okay.
Before we get signed off, I want to go back for a moment just with Paul. I really would appreciate if you can send me in the direction of finding a legitimate article that talks about armaments brought to the January 6th and some of these other things that you mentioned. So
I have something which I will send to you once we get off.
I wasn't asking you, I was asking Paul.
Oh, okay. I found one.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay.
I'm willing to accept that.
All right. Fair enough.
Just real quick, did you happen to watch it? I watched all from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Actually, from before 1 to after 6.
I watched most of it.
then
Did you happen to
you
see?
had to have seen, if you watched it, you had to have seen the people outside, and you had to have seen that they had guns.
No, I did not see that. Let me ask you all a general question. How many of you saw, I didn't see the Kristen Cinema. I missed that today. I'm hopefully I can see that. How many of you saw Ted Cruz interview a woman yesterday with the FBI?